this video I'm going to go over how to add an overlay into the game. So here's the Hawaiian Islands, and I've already done something, so you can see. So that's Honolulu right there. That looks pretty cool, but look, I can keep zooming in. Notice how over here it's pretty, there's not much detail, but I've done multiple overlays. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 different overlays, and I can zoom in pretty darn close and see a lot of detail. It's kind of ridiculous. This isn't something you would actually want to do in a scenario you were going to give to other people because the files are a little too big. I think I'm probably at 11 or 12 megabytes right now, which actually is pretty good. I've optimized them in Photoshop. This would have been just straight out of Gmaps. This was like 40 or 50 megabytes, I think. So an interesting thing here, this should be accurate as far as GPS and longitude and latitude. If you look at the depth, this is saying it's 7 feet. And it's pretty accurate as far as whether or not that's water or it's over land. There, that's -7. That's +13. That's +23. That's -26. So it's sort of spotty. As cool as this is, it's really not getting you very much, but it is pretty darn cool. I think what I've done for the island in general is probably about the maximum amount of usefulness, maybe a little bit more than that. But again, on the airfield, this is another overlay. You can really zoom in pretty close, and again, that's saying it's 7 feet, 10 feet, -16 feet. I mean, it's pretty close to, it's pretty amazing. There's back over the runway, -7 feet, -30 feet. A little bit off, but I'm pretty sure it's in the right place. It's just where it's just so much detail. You gotta wonder, oh, I'm looking at the layer. Wrong thing. Here, back on the runway. Depth -6, +7, -62, +3, -43. It's pretty accurate. But again, it's not really buying you that much in the game. You could certainly place a plane right there if you wanted to. But it's not like you could actually drop a bomb right there. There would have to be a unit there that you could drop something on. But it is pretty cool. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these, and we'll show you how we did some of it. I'm not sure I'll be able to do as good of a job as I did there, but we'll give it a try. Let's see. So let's go back over here. Under Custom Layers, under View is where I have these. And it is important what order you do. You have to do the bottom layer as the first thing you add in, which is the whole island. So I'm going to remove this, remove that, and now you'll see where I did. This is an overlay of the whole island, and then there's another overlay here that's just of the bay, the harbor, and the airfield. If you get rid of that, you'll see how that changes. That one didn't really do a whole lot. I think it added maybe one zoom in. And then we'll get rid of this, and you'll see a pretty big change on here. I kind of like this level of detail. Yep. Okay, so to generate those, you need to use a tool called Gmaps, and that's what I have here. And I got that a couple of different places, belugancampaign.com. The Power of Overlays. He's got a link to it that goes back to the forum, which is to this post, I believe. And this is it right here. It looks like Gmaps, as it is here, is a port of this Great Maps, where it looks like the change that they did. So I've downloaded it from here also under Releases, and then here. The difference is that it saves the image file as a PNG, and then the world file it saves as a PGW, I think, instead of a JPGW. But you could still use this. You just have to rename the world file as PGW, and then you have to resave the JPEG as a PNG because I believe the game only supports PNGs. So this had a pretty good overview of how to do it. And then this is the actual software, and I'll go back and get this. Where do I have that? So it's not something that you actually install on your computer. Here's the other one. There's a few different releases. I did this one. This one here, you don't install. It's never going to be under your programs and applications. It doesn't have an installer. You just download the file, unzip it, and then double click it. And it always starts out in this same spot. You can move the map around. Actually, the first thing you might notice when you open it up is it might not have a map that works. So the tile, it might be a bunch of tiles that say this. First time I opened up it said this. I just assumed it was broken. But then I noticed over here, you choose the map that you want to use. There are a lot of different maps in here. The ones that I think works well is the Bing satellite map. This is the one that I've been using. But a lot of them actually work. The Google ones don't seem to work. Some of them do. There's a bunch of them down at the bottom. All these ARC GIS ones work. Not 100% sure what they actually are. They're some of them are kind of interesting. Some of them are at an angle. More topographical there. Streets. Anyways, let's go back. So you can choose the map there. I'm going to go back to the Bing satellite hybrid. I think it's got too many street names and whatnot on it. Bing satellites. Anytime you click on it, it gives you this little arrow. Sort of wants to create a point. I just sort of ignore that. The way you move the map around is by right-clicking and then hold and drag, and you can go around. So we'll go out to the Hawaiian Islands here, and you press Shift, and then you can draw a box around something. And then once you have the box around it, you click on Get Static. This is going to pop up another little window, and then here you have this zoom level. Be very careful with that. The higher you go, the larger the file and the more detail you get. But they generate huge files. When I click Generate, it's gonna generate a PNG file of this selection, and then it's also going to make this world file because that is checked. You need the world file. You need both files. When you click Generate, based on how quick this goes, you can tell pretty quick whether or not it's going to be a huge file or not. That is not going to be a huge file. That went really quick. So I'm going to go ahead, and I think that looks good for the base layer of the map. We'll use that. And I'm going to close this. And so after it generates, it saves it out on your desktop. I haven't been able to figure out how to control where it's saving it. So here's the two files. I've just been dragging them into another folder so I know where they are. And that's here. And now I can add that as an overlay, but it's not going to look very good because it's going to have sharp edges. So I'm going to do some Photoshop to it to make it work, to make it look better. But first we will add it just so we can show that it works. You add the image. It's going to suck in this PGW file. And there it is. So that's great, but I really don't like the way the shading is. I mean, you can see that from a mile away. I like to blend it in. And to do that, I use Photoshop. You could use GIMP. I'm not a GIMP user, so I don't exactly know how to use that, but I am a pretty decent Photoshop user. So I'm going to go back here and we'll remove that. And the way I'm blending it is I do a screenshot of the map without the overlay, and then I blend the two. So that way you get whatever the shading is around it, which is why when I did it over here, I did sort of I had plenty of space around it because I'm going to erase all of this darker blue ocean and let the lighter blue ocean from here show in, and then it's going to be more seamless. So in Windows 10, a quick shortcut to do a screenshot of just a particular spot is Shift Windows S. And then we are going to grab sort of the same amount of area like that. That just copied it to my clipboard. I am going to go back over here and I'm going to open up this in Photoshop. Okay, so there is my file. I'm going to go back to the Move tool here, and now I'm going to press Control V to paste in this screenshot from the game, and I'm going to lower the opacity here. So this is the layer that's got the screen capture from it. Bottom layer is the one from Gmaps. I've got this layer selected right now. I'm going to press Control T, transform, and then I press Shift to make it so that it's proportional when I transform it. That's one of the fun new things in Photoshop, that they reverse the behavior on that, because some of us that have used Photoshop for 20 years would really like to change the shortcut keys. But I digress. I think I was able to reverse that. So let's see, with the transparency lower, all I want to do is sort of roughly line this up. It doesn't have to be perfect. I think I have snap on. Turn that off. That's actually looks pretty good. Maybe it needs to be a smidge bigger. All right, I'm going to press return to apply the transformation. We'll move the opacity back up. Yeah, that's in pretty much the same spot. So now I need to reverse the order of the layers. I'm going to move the Gmaps layer up, and now I'm going to add a layer mask to it. And the reason why I'm doing this instead of erasing it to make it transparent is a transparent file is much larger than a non-transparent file. We're going to be able to save these as PNG 8-bit instead of 24-bit, and they're going to be smaller. I have the layer mask on. I've got black selected. I've got the brush tool selected. Now I'm just going to quickly go around the edges. And this could be as rough as you want it to be. The main thing is to get the edges. While I'm at it, I am just going to clean up the rest of this. And so the actual file that's going to be in the game is going to be the one from Gmaps. It's going to have the other one in the background, but the detail that you see around the edge is the Gmap image, and it is going to be correct as far as the location of it. So when I put this file over it and tried to line it up, it didn't really need to be that exact. It probably could have been a little bit smaller than the Gmap one. All I'm really trying to do is get the color of the ocean around the outside. This is going to make it blend in. And so that's basically what we need, is that right there. While I'm at it, I think this image looks a little flat, and I'm sort of obsessive, so I'm going to make it a little punchier. Something like that. But then I need to clip that to that layer so that it doesn't make the ocean. That really even do anything? Not really. Okay, so from here I need to save it, and the trick here is you don't want to do save as, you want to export it and do save for web legacy. As far as I know, they still haven't come up with this dialog box in the latest Photoshop. And what you want here is a PNG 8, and that's what it's set at. Down here it's saying you that the file size is going to be 416. If I change this to PNG 24, it just more than doubled in size. Now it's 1 megabyte. That's not that big of a deal for this particular image, but when we get to the closer ones that have more detail, it is going to be it's going to be a huge difference in the file size. And you can tell there was no difference in the color, and I don't have to do transparency. If you try to do transparency with a PNG 8, it doesn't do a smooth transition into the part that you erased. And now there's a bit of a trick here. I'm going to go ahead and save it in this Gmaps folder. It's going to be alongside. I guess I could have overwritten the other one, couldn't I? I haven't been doing that. Let's go back and do that. Export, save for web, PNG, save. No, I don't want to do that. So there's a bit of a trick here when it does the save for web. It's adding all these dashes, which is something I'd like to go change in the Gmaps thing, is to make the file name slugified so it doesn't have any spaces. Spaces are illegal characters in a lot of different things, especially in browsers. You don't want spaces. But these two files have to have the same exact file name. So I'm going to highlight this one and copy the file name. And then I am going to delete it because we don't need it anymore. And now I'm going to paste the file name in here. and now they're the same file. So now when I go back to the game, I can load this in and it should look pretty seamless with the rest of the surrounding map. Yep, so you don't have the square around it that was there before. I still can't zoom in like I could in the starting example, so let's do that. Back to Gmaps. We'll get rid of that, and we're going to zoom in here. We'll do the airfield. And again, it doesn't matter how close you're zooming in here so much. What matters is the zoom level when you have the get static image. So I'm going to press Shift, draw a square around this again. And the smaller you can make this, the better. But again, I want to leave space around it so that I can erase it to make it fit with the background. Get static. 14. Let's see, what was the zoom at on the other one? It tells you in the file name. The other is zoom at 11. 14 is pretty close. Let's see how long it takes to generate. Whoa, that was quick. That's not particularly detailed, but that might be a good file size is now up to 1.1, but that's going to be less. Let's open it up in Photoshop, see what it looks like. Yeah, I think we'll go one more. Not quite detailed enough for me. Bump it up to 15. Pretty sure I was using 16 in the other ones. Let's do 16. Still generates pretty quick. Drives me crazy. It doesn't show you it in here. Now we're at 17 megabytes. That's a little out of control. It's going to be detailed though. Yep, that is pretty detailed. Let's see how big it'll be if we save it as a PNG 8. Export, save for web legacy. Down to 4. All right, that might be worth it. Be hard to. Maybe we should go one less. 15. In the forum, the largest file size you can share on the forum is 10 megabytes. Let's see, so that's this one. We're down to 4. Yep, this will be a good one. So again, I'll load this in, and you're going to see that there's going to be some jagged areas. It's going to be a harsh transition from where the overlay is to where the rest of it is, and I don't like the way that looks. But the detail is there. That's pretty good detail. I think that's a good. It's pretty darn detailed. So here I am going to do the same thing. We're going to get rid of this overlay. And Windows Shift S. I'm going to zoom out a little. No, zoom in. Shift S. And we'll go open up this file, the 15. Open in Photoshop. Paste this one on top. Boy, that is rough. It's going to be Control T, press Shift. And I'm forgetting to change the opacity. Go ahead and change, undo and change that. Control T. Let's see, where is it? So I'm comparing this part of the overlay with this runway in the background, trying to make them the same size. And again, it doesn't have to be totally perfect. It needs to be bigger still. Can't quite tell. I have the opacity a little too low, I think. Ooh, that is just an ugly map. But again, all I really want is the area around it. So as long as it's pretty close, That should be good enough. And we need to put a layer mask on here. And again, we're going to paint around the outside. And this is just so that it blends in with the map. Which does sort of matter that you line it up as good as you can. This map might just be a little too ugly. Looks like it works though. You want to see the runway. Export, save as web, PNG. Look at that, we're under a megabyte. Nice. And again, the file name is going to be incorrect. It's going to have a bunch of dashes in it since we saved it as web. That's really this one. Copy that. I'm going to keep that as a B version in case we want to look at it. Back to the game. And we need to load that overlay. That was 15. Need the one that doesn't have B in it. Yeah, a little rough around the edges, but that's better than the other one. So let's go look and see what the other one looks like. And we'll load it on top. And I can't do that because it says B. We'd have to rename the other thing. How is that going to work? This thing here. And then we want to bring in the B picture and it should load on top. Yep. Just as an example to show what a harsh transition that is compared to what we did in Photoshop. That's also might be I think that's also a larger file. So we'll delete this one and move this out of the way so you can see what it looks like when we remove it. Yeah. A little bit of line there on the corners, but not too bad. And then there's the one for the bay. I'll just do a little bit of an extreme example of what you're not going to want to do. So far, the files that we've made would all go fine. That 15 is the one that we didn't run through Photoshop, so it's really big. This 16, are we using it? I don't think we're using it. What was 16? 16 is the one we're using, but before we put it into, yep, it's the same image. The runway and everything's the same amount of detail. To see how big that file is, that's 17 megabytes, and we got it down to, is that true? That's not true. Maybe that's the one that's, maybe that is more detail. Yeah. Yep, you can just see a little bit more detail in the planes. But for that detail, you're paying a huge price in the file size, which is 17 compared to under 1. So 17 files, 17 times bigger. And keep in mind, that's just for the airport. You know, if you wanted that much detail on a whole coastline or something, it's just too much. The file size is too much. And you can sort of understand why the game is the way it is, because it is so much data to be able to get the detail. So we'll do a crazy one of the whole area here. Back in Gmaps, press Shift. Shift. We'll do this whole area. Get static. And so one that had the good detail was a 16. But that was just when we had the airport. So let's go ahead and generate this one and see what it does. You can tell right away by how long it takes that it is not going to work. It's going to be huge. It would work locally in your game, but you'd never want to distribute this to somebody else. Okay, so it finally finished exporting. That felt like it took 30 or 40 seconds. Let's go back over here and see what we got. I'm guessing it's going to be quite huge. 100 megabytes. Let's see what happens when we open it in Photoshop. Damn, look at that detail. That's awesome. Let's see how small we can get it. Probably not going to be happy about exporting a PNG. Down to 25 megs, quarter of the size. That's it's not too bad. Amount of detail is amazing. All right, so let's get rid of these others. Well, we'll just get rid of that one because we still need the island. Now I'll add the layer for that. Again, I didn't delete anything in Photoshop, so it's going to be a harsh transition, and it's going to take a long time to load. Not necessarily a long time, but it takes several seconds to load. And I think it might have crashed. Oh no, there it is. Look at that. So what's the depth here? 7. Yeah, 10. Minus 26. Some of it gets right. But look at the detail. It's just amazing. Elevation 7 feet, minus 62 feet, minus 7, or plus 7. Okay, so now that we have the overlay in the game, you can't just save the game like this and expect to be able to share it with somebody else and have it work. We have to do some stuff to package it up. So I'm going to go back over here to Belugan Campaign. Preparing the overlays. Editor scenario attachment. Create new. You have to load your overlays in as attachments. And then you need to package the scenario for distribution. A zip file will be created in the directory you saved. You need the GUID of a folder that the attachments are going to go into. Sometimes I'm able to do this on the first try. Other times I am not, and I have to try it again. It's a little hard to test because once we add these as attachments, you have to keep deleting them to make sure that you'd be the same as what somebody else would get. So I have scenario attachments here under editor. This is already set to map overlay. This is a button even though it doesn't look like it. And now you go out and get your overlays. We use this one and we use 15. We use that one. So now we have added scenario attachments. Just going to go back, make sure they're really there. They are. And back over here. We've done this first bit. You can skip the next step, but it makes writing the script easier, especially when you have already other attachments in the repo directory. I do not. Well, I do, but they don't have today's dates. Best way to load the scenarios, best way to load the overlays is on an event. And then you use, that's where I got that curly quote right there. I am going to copy this because it's going to cause a problem. Down here, see this quote here? That is not a curly quote. See that quote right there? That is a curly quote, and it's an illegal character. When I did this earlier, I copied this part and then just put my GUID in between there, and it didn't work. Let's copy this one down here, actually, and see. I thought I did, but now that I see the curly quote up there, maybe that's what I did. So what we need here is an event. New events. And we're going to want this to always repeat, so that way if you save a game and you go to reload it, it'll reload the overlays. I already created a trigger for scenario is loaded because that's pretty easy. Go down here, edit actions. We'll create an action that is Lua script. And we will call this send load overlays also. I'm going to paste that in there. And then we need a GUID to put in here. And I believe that that is the GUID that is right here. There's two of them. So I have two files. We need to load them in order. That is the big one. That is 9D. That is the runway airfield. This is the island, so we need to load that first. And then we'll duplicate this. And what was that? We got one that starts with 929. So we got that one. Then we need this one. That. Okay, that is a different one. Let's make sure that is right. They sure. 3939. They both start with 9. Okay, I like it. Click OK. See if those quote marks work. They look right. But that's the problem with those curly quotes. They don't always show up as curly quotes depending on what the font is. Then we need to add that here. Repeatable. OK. That should do it for the action. We can test the action. Let's do that. Remove. Remove. And we'll go back to that action, and we're going to copy this and run it in the Lua console to make sure it works. I think that works. Yep. Cool. All right. We should be ready to go. I'm going to save this. And then we're going to go up here under Editor, and we're going to package it, which is going to put the attachments with the scenario file into a zip folder. Overlay zip already. Do you want to know? We're going to call this number 2. And where are we putting it? Scenarios. Overlays. Save. So now what are we going to do? We're going to exit this just to make sure we're going to get a fresh start. And we are going to, this just does not want to go away. We are going to delete the 2 of these. So we're in the Matrix Games attachments. I want to delete these 2 that are new for tonight so that I can know that if somebody else has downloaded this scenario that they're going to get the same thing. Now we're going to go back over to Scenarios, Overlays. We're going to copy this out of the zip. Going to go back here. We're going to paste them back in here. We're going to overwrite the overlay file. Interesting, it rename the scenario inside as Overlay 2 because that's what I packaged it up as. All right, that's interesting. Wasn't expecting that. So that's the one we're going to want to run. Notice that there's an attachments folder here, and those are the 2 folders that we linked up. As soon as we run this scenario, that attachment folder is going to disappear, and it's going to suck them into the game's attachment folder. Load existing, overlay 2, fingers crossed. Look at that, it worked. Oh my god. That's like the 15th time I did this. So it's easy. You just have to follow the right steps, but that is literally like, I don't know, maybe not the 15th, but that is at least the 6th or 7th try I did that. I think I kept packaging it up and that kept making new GUIDs for some reason. So I said the attachment folder was going to disappear. There, it's gone. Go back over here, and in the attachments repo, now you can see those 2 folders. And so if I save this, let's see, we'll move time forward. There's nothing in this, so there, we'll say local time is now 20:04. We're going to save it. We'll even save it as a save instead of scenario. Save. Exit just to make sure. Go back. Yes. This time we're going to load a saved game. There it is inside the overlays folder. And there it is. All right, so it's not too hard. The thing that I would be careful about is that if you go crazy on the detail, you have to ask yourself, what's the real point of doing that? You could make a huge file and get really good detail, but it's not necessarily adding much to somebody else's experience of playing the game. Though I think this level of detail is worthwhile. It just looks cool. That's a pretty small file. What I did for the runways, that was kind of cool, but if I remove this, it's certainly easier to look at, although you did lose the well, I guess you didn't lose the mountain range entirely. You can still see the relief layer, that's a mountain range. In some ways that might be easier to see actually, where you could, if you were going to route something through there, that might actually be easier to see than it is without it. Not really though, wouldn't say that. All right, there you go, basic overlays.